Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our final SPJ Sports Committee Zoom event of what's been our inaugural year. Pretty incredible year. I was just talking with Lauren Vassallo, our vice chair, and our featured guest, Jared Sandler, tonight about some of the guests and just the awesome list it's been. And Jared caps it off. Jared, it's great to have you with us.
Greetings. Thanks so much for having me. I hope you guys enjoy the butterflies in my wife's office. She's a big butterfly fan, so I hope you guys are too.
Excellent art in the background for sure. So, Jared, I'll preface by saying, as you guys know from the poster, radio play-by-play and pre and post-game voice for the Texas Rangers, jack of all trades, and candidly, a friend of mine as well, unlike some of the other guests we've had on who've become a friend. Jared's been a friend for a long time, based here, obviously, in the DFW. Um, his background, just to kind of give you the nuts and bolts, went to USC, graduated from there in 2011. I think you played some club baseball. Is that right, Jared?
I walked onto the baseball team there for a year, but I was like the Rudy. I was never going to play, and so I ended up that was back in 2007. You could redshirt anyone or as many people as you wanted. The rules changed. I was not that caliber of a player, but I was short and I worked hard, and so the coaches liked me.
And that's how we end up in these jobs, right?
Yeah.
So after there, wound up in Michigan from 2011 to 2014, doing various things in a full-time role: minor league baseball play-by-play, hosting afternoon drive sports talk radio, did some D1 basketball, D1 football coverage, and then left a full-time job in 2014 to come to Dallas, to what was ESPN Dallas, which is no longer around, on the radio. Took a job there, and a short time after that, wound up taking advantage of an opportunity at 105 Through the Fan, which is the flagship radio station of the Texas Rangers. For those who haven't necessarily followed Rangers' recent history that closely, it's been a really interesting time since when Jared got started with the team. That was 2016, their last playoff appearance until this year. He's been through some tough seasons, and then obviously the euphoria of a World Series run this past year. And I kind of wanted to start there. You've been working with Eric Nadel, who's legendary play-by-play voice on the radio for the Rangers since, I believe, 1979. And he finally got to do that call, to make that call of the team winning the World Series, their first ever. And I have it queued up. I'm going to play it here for everyone, and then we'll talk about it.
Can anyone else hear it? Because I can't hear it. No one else could hear it. Okay. Don't think anyone could hear it there, Jeff.
Can't hear it?
No.
Sorry about that, guys. I thought that would work. Anyways, well, Jared, you know what it sounds like. What were kind of the emotions, I guess, behind understanding what goes into a call like that? You build up dreaming of making a call like that for so many years, and then he had that chance.
Yeah, I think that I don't know, when you first start broadcasting, maybe there's some goosebumps, nerves. I remember the first time I did a live show in front of a actual audience, not staring into a microphone in an empty studio, and I was a little nervous. I think as you get going, though, you've experienced all these things, and it just becomes sort of what you do. I think that moment is one where you can mess up a call in the fifth inning of a World Series game, right? Even a big game, and no one's really going to pay much attention to it. Eric had a moment in the Astros series where he called a 3-run home run a grand slam. It's just an honest mistake. It happens, and not a big deal. But that call, that moment, especially the first ever in a franchise's history, you got to nail it. And you want it to be meaningful. You want it to connect to the fan base. And I thought Eric did such a great job. And yeah, I mean, he came so close on 2 occasions, 1 strike away, twice in 2011, obviously in 2010, the year before. They were never that close, but they made it to the World Series. And, he's been around for 45 years. And I know that there were moments when he thought he would never get that opportunity again. And so As a Mavs fan growing up, when the Mavs won the title in 2011, one of the common sentiments was, we're happy as Mavs fans, but we're just so happy for Dirk. I think one of the common sentiments for people, maybe not necessarily the entire fan base, but avid listeners of the radio and then people in the organization, one of the common sentiments was, hey, we're just so happy that, not only did Eric have that moment, but he nailed it. I mean, it was such a great call. And again, I think what I love national broadcasts, right? Like I was listening to Bob Costas earlier today talk about just how funny it is that fan bases think that national broadcasters always hate their teams. And, I will be the first one to combat that and be on the front lines defending the national guys. But I do think one of the great advantages of a local broadcaster is that he or she is connected to the fan base. They gain an understanding of what it means to be a fan of that team. And that was very much felt in Eric's call when he, if you have heard, I know Jeff tried to play it, but he made the remark, "You're not dreaming, Rangers fans," and that's just one of the stories of being a Rangers fan is heartbreak. The organization had been around since 1972 in Arlington, had never won a World Series, and his call very much was representative of what it means to be a Rangers fan. I think that's a part of what made it so special.
Yeah, sorry that didn't play, guys. I did just send the link out, so if you're on mute and you want to listen to it, go ahead. You can hear, I think the "you're not dreaming" part from Eric is just like so authentic and just captured the shock in such a good way for this team. Reminder, this is an interactive event. Just raise your hand if you have a question. We'll get to as many as we can here in the next 50 or so minutes with Jared on this event. In that vein, Jared, as far as play-by-play goes and broadcasting in general, whether it's TV, radio, whatnot, everyone's always trying to find their voice when they get going. On the play-by-play side, what would you say to young broadcasters about that process of trying to find your voice?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously one of the biggest challenges. If there's someone 18, 19, 20, 23, 25 years old who feels like they found their voice, then I'm incredibly jealous because I was scrambling and searching back then. And I'm just, for whatever perspective, I'm 34 now. So I would tell you that I maybe five to 7 years ago, somewhere in that range, is when I really kind of felt like it wasn't something that was living between my ears in terms of like something I needed to do. I know on the play-by-play side, you learn at an early stage about the mechanics of doing play-by-play. Things like, every 90 seconds, time and score, or every first down, in football, make sure you're giving time and score, and use your lefts and your rights, and don't say, did you see this on radio? Because they can't see it, or on TV, the way you tee up and set up your analysts. But that stuff's all important. I think it's also important to remember that we aren't robots, and you can't worry about the mechanics when you're doing a game. I mean, it's got to be something that you work on in between games. I think if you try fit into a box, just trying to be a mechanical robot, I hear it a lot with minor league baseball broadcasters. They're trying, I know what they're doing. They want to put together a perfect half inning that they can use as a demo. And so they want everything mechanically to sound great. What I want to tell all these kids, and I try whenever I have a chance to, is no one listening to your tape is sitting there making note of how, whether you said time and score every 90 seconds, or gosh, 97 seconds this time, that's a fail. Or if mechanically you're not doing something that is totally by the book, they want you to sound entertaining. And I don't think you can sound entertaining unless you're just talking. And I think sometimes there's a habit. I mean, I don't have this deep, big, booming voice, right? And so there's definitely a degree of awareness when I was younger, like, oh my gosh, I don't sound like this big, powerful, deep voice broadcaster. I got to try and manufacture this great voice. And the reality is, there are going to be some people who have voices, it's going to be more of a challenge Just like if you're a basketball player and you're 5'9", it's going to be a little more of a challenge than if you're 6'9". Doesn't mean you can't work around it, but the less you start worrying about mechanics, the less you start, worrying about how your voice is sounding, and just your voice is your voice, in terms of the actual thing that's coming out of your mouth. And then that allows you to bring in your personality and bring in the elements that actually make a broadcast fun and enjoyable to listen to. I've never once had a boss or a listener, like a fan, come up to me and say, Jared, I love the way the mechanics of your broadcast sound. They talk about the funny interactions, the entertaining conversations, the energy behind a play call, which you can't bring all that to the forefront if you're up here when it's going on, worrying about the mechanics of everything, or getting in your head if you mess up the mechanics of something. And that I think applies to play-by-play. I think it applies to any broadcast or performance medium. At some point, you just got to go out and be you. And if you're not satisfied with whatever level of you are at, you work on it in between games. But when you're out there broadcasting to an audience, you just got to be you. And I guess the only caveat I'd say is, when I was broadcasting in Great Falls, Montana, or Midland, Michigan, is it a little bit easier to use the game as a training ground? Sure, yeah. I'm broadcasting to parents and friends and cousins of the players there, and I work on stuff every single time I take the air, but I can't have 17 things in my head of what I want to work on when I'm calling a big AL West game in September that's, got first place on the line. At some point, I just got to be confident in the work I've done and the level I'm at. And then, we go back to the drawing board after that, because you're never going to be a finished product.
Maybe golf is the perfect metaphor, right? You can't work on the swing mid-round. You're just going to lose more balls. You got to work on the range. So
nothing with golf seems to work for me. So I don't know if I can relate to that, but
probably most of us.
I hear that.
Yeah, no, but it was, it's been the same thing from the traditional local TV side too. I think people in smaller markets, it's, oh my gosh, we have these big games today and we don't always have a show that's stacked like this. I have to nail how I say this and I have to try and do this extra. But I think being authentic and being natural is really key, like you're saying. So let's go back to the beginning. So I know you mentioned Montana. We've talked about Michigan. Kind of bring us through post USC, your step-by-step to getting here to Dallas, getting to the Rangers.
Well, sorry, Jeff. Lauren, did you have something? I saw it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I was just going to follow up on that real quick, and I'm sorry, Jeff, that I
No, go for it.
So just to follow up on what you were saying, so how do you find then that balance of, I'm not front facing camera, nor do I want to be, but I can tell you, even in just my behind the scenes work, I get in my head a lot. So how is that balance of coming across authentic, genuine, and your voice, while getting out of your head of like, okay, I know I need to hit this time, or I know I need to, get this yardage down correct, or whatever? How are you able to kind of balance those two dichotomies?
Yeah, so there are two people who have been more influential to me from a broadcasting standpoint than anyone else. One is Eric Nadel, who we've talked about. The other is Jason Benetti. So Eric, from a very early stage, told me the importance of making mistakes and learning how to deal with it. And, he said that when he listens to broadcasters, he almost enjoys when they make a mistake, because it humanizes them, right? There are times when, guys and gals speak so perfectly and so in such a polished way. It's impressive, but just this interaction right here, stumbling or hesitating or whatever. That's just how it unfolds when you're having a normal conversation. And you just got to be okay with making a mistake. I think, with Jason, who is so, and I don't know, for people who aren't familiar with Jason Benetti, he's incredible. Lauren, I'm sure I hope you interacted with him at some point when you're still doing stuff with ESPN. But he just switched from being the television voice of the White Sox to the Tigers. He does stuff all over for Fox, FS1. He's one of their lead play-by-play voices and one of the brightest people I've ever met. It's not, it's never one of like the first 10 things I'll mention about him, but he also has cerebral palsy. And I think the way he goes about, taking some of the challenges he faces and either turning them into strengths or just ignoring them and overcoming them is a lesson for all of us, whether we've got some sort of diagnosed condition or not. It's really remarkable. You want to talk about like the 5'9" guy who's told he can't play in the NBA. I mean, Jason's on TV and he's got, because of his condition, he's got essentially, the best way I can say it is a lazy eye, not your traditional, TV look. And here he is. He's one of the best TV broadcasters in sports, in my opinion. It's really impressive. And Jason, one of the things we talked about when I was in the minor leagues was, my demo tape, and I would be wrecked. I would top of the first inning, at 1, 2, 3 inning. All right. So that's probably not going to be a good inning to use. Bottom of the first. All right. We got some action. I mess one thing up. It might be a mechanic that no one else in the world would know about other than me. And I was wrecked for the next like 3 or 4 innings. And then I'd kind of, all right, hey, let's gather ourselves. This can be the next half inning. And I was essentially chasing a job. I was chasing my next job every time I was on air. And he really taught me to just enjoy the heck and love the heck out of, every opportunity to broadcast. And it's so cliche, but it's the whole, I could be 9 to 5 staring at spreadsheets, doing something that is incredibly uninteresting. And maybe one day that's what I will end up doing, but I'm going to enjoy, the opportunities to broadcast while I have them. And then, when I'm 22 years old in Midland, Michigan, I don't know if I'm going to, end up working for the Texas Rangers. For all I know, that's going to be my last stop. I'm going to burn out 2 years later. But I certainly would have if I never got rid of chasing that job. And so I think, Lauren, I don't know if I'm totally answering the question, but it was just so important for me to understand 2 things. One, I'm not going to get my next job because of any one broadcast. That's just not going to happen. Even a great half inning from a demo reel, there's so much more that goes into it. There's the communication, the conversations you have with the people hiring. There's the references, everything, the interactions I have on a daily basis with people. It all plays a role. The other thing is broadcasting kind of is this nebulous, subjective, never ending dangling carrot, right? Like I'm never, ever going to be a finished product. No one will be. The people who think they are probably not the people who are going to succeed in this industry. And that was really tough for me to balance when I was younger, because at no point did I ever feel like there was a minute of the day where I couldn't be getting better. And I mean that literally. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every single moment of my waking day I was working on broadcasting, but probably too much of it I was, because my whole thought was there's probably some kid at Syracuse who's, working on broadcasting, or one of these guys in maybe one of the minor leagues that I'm not, not in the Midwest League, which is where I was with the Loons in Michigan. They're probably working on it. So, and I'm not, the best broadcaster in the league. So if I'm not the best broadcaster in the league and there are all these other leagues, and it was this dangerous cycle that really, it put me in a rough spot. And Jason taught me to just take time for myself and enrich, do something that's enriching, watch mindless, stupid television. I got into Gossip Girl because I thought Blake Lively was gorgeous. And for me, like, I know it's kind of a joke and it's funny, but like, that was time for me to I'd watch Gossip Girl. That was like the first show that I started watching during that time that forced me to take my foot off the pedal. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it had this domino effect that made me a happier person, because I wasn't turning down opportunities to do fun things because I needed to lock myself in my apartment and review tape, right? And there's a balance. That doesn't mean I ignore the work. It doesn't mean I ignore the necessity to work outside of those opportunities on air, but it's finding the right balance. And I was a happier person. My broadcast became better. I think my confidence grew because I felt better about the work I was doing. And I just think all that stuff is really interconnected. So I kind of went off on a tangent there. But those moments early on were so much more important to me than any lesson I could have learned in a classroom about how to be a broadcaster. It was just understanding how to be an adult and balancing ambition as well as mental health, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying all that, because I have to tell myself if I miss a spot, or if I, forget branding on something that hits air, and it's like, Lauren, this is not open heart surgery, like this is nothing. So we miss a spot, big deal. There's always the next hour. So I appreciate you being candid about that. And it's humbling. And I think we as a culture for many, many years, we focus on the grind. But I think in order to have the grind, you need those moments of rest. And Gossip Girl, and yes, Blake Lively is gorgeous. So you're not wrong there.
And it's a great show too. It was a really entertaining show. I liked it.
I've actually never even seen it, so maybe I'll add that to my
Me
list now.
either. I need to check it out.
You should.
I think we're gonna start transitioning. We'll get a couple questions here. So I see Aaron's hand has been up. So Aaron, I'm gonna ask you I'll have you unmute and just state your name and where you're from and what you do, and ask your question to Jared.
Hey, Jared, thanks for coming out tonight. Yeah, I'm Aaron. I'm a senior at the University of Maryland. And transitioning from the play-by-play to the more of the hosting side, what tips do you have for hosting pregame shows on the radio specifically? And what's your guys' format like at 105.3 The Fan for the Rangers?
Yeah, I think it depends on what the segments of the pregame show are, right? So for us, we have a game, we call it the game preview. It's 3 minutes of just previewing that night's game, or maybe discussing pertinent storylines. But again, it's 3 minutes, so you really can't go super in depth. But what we decided to do, and I think this is important for, maybe it's a theme, and maybe this is the best way to answer, instead of trying to do 50 different things over the course of a studio show, do 10 things, but do them really, really well, right? Or so instead of trying to force in 4 questions in 3 minutes and telling, my broadcast partner, Matt Hicks, with whom I do this game preview, hey, be really quick. I'd rather ask him one question on a relevant topic and let him, do what he does and getting into that topic. Same thing for the manager show. We interview Bruce Bochy before every game. Then we get in, we do we call it the inside look. It's, I mean, it can really be anything, but it's a 60 to 90-second opportunity to present some interesting information about a player, something that happened the night before, whatever the case might be. But again, I think it's important. Your listeners will get more learning one thing than you trying to throw 17 different stats down their throat, especially over the radio medium. TV's a little different. You got the visual. I still don't think in a short period of time you want to force feed too much, but you can maybe do a little bit more. And then we'll do a player interview. And every series, I'll make sure to get someone from the other team. I'm going to try to get one of their notable players, right? I might not be able to get Mike Trout, but wasn't going to get Shohei Ohtani when he was with the Angels, but I'm going to try to get someone who, I think is notable to maybe the average baseball fan, to try, and I think it's important to help grow the game, right? I also think unless you have a directive from a boss to make it all about your team, I think it's important to give a little bit on the other team. I think it just helps the product and the game. But again, with these interviews, instead of asking them a series of what's your favorite this or who's your favorite that, I might pick a moment that they were a part of, right? Like off the top of my head, if I ever interviewed Joe Musgrove for a pregame show, I might ask him about when he threw a no-hitter against the Rangers and focus solely on that topic. And we could probably talk for 30 minutes about that, right? Even though it's a 5 to 6 minute interview. That was something that Aaron Goldsmith shared with me, one of the broadcasters for the Mariners, that you tend to get more out of interview subjects if you have like not just a plan, because I don't want to say I didn't have plans going in, but you have a focused effort on something, as opposed to just asking them questions that you could ask anyone. I think that whether it's consciously or subconsciously, you're going to get more out of interview subjects when you are asking them questions that you can't just ask every single person in that clubhouse, that are specific to them, or maybe a moment of which, they were a part. And then always avoid the yes or no question when you can. You're gonna get way more out of a, what are your thoughts, not did you think, or how would you not, not whatever the complimentary question would be, that's yes or no. You're going to get people who will still give you good answers with yes or no, but you're giving them an opportunity to give you a lesser answer when it's a yes or no question, as opposed to something that is open-ended, that forces them to give you a proper response.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Good question, Aaron. Let's go to our next question from Courtney.
Hi, Jared. Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I am currently underground at American Airlines Center right now. I work for the Stars, so we have a game tonight. So thanks, Jeff, for having me on for just a second, so I can ask Jared this question. We all know that like athletes, for the most part, can be incredibly superstitious in their routines. And with you going through the same amount of games, would you say that you are also a little superstitious, or have like your own kind of routine that you like to abide by on game days?
I definitely have routines. I used to be way more superstitious. I mean, I was like the most superstitious athlete I knew, and it like became a problem. Not like a serious like clinical problem, but I I don't I have routines, but if for whatever, I mean, we play 162 games, and so there are going to be games, whether it's a day game, maybe a late, we get into a city at 5 a.m, and so maybe I'm not going to get to the park as early, that game, or maybe it takes me longer because I'm waiting on someone for an interview, and it just, they say, hey, let's do it at 4, and it ends up being 4:30, right? Like, I'm a very schedule oriented type A person. But I think with broadcasting, I've gotten better at, hey, this is my routine, this is what I want to do. But if if I have to change it up, that's okay. I don't want to be in a mental headspace where I'm now stressing over sticking to a routine or scrambling to get stuff done. Like prepping for a game, filling out my book, there are always things that if I had more time, I'd want to put into my scorebook, from a prep standpoint. But I'm going to put in what I'm going to put in. And if I run out of time because I need to have dinner before I need to eat, I need to just take 10 minutes to unplug before we go on air, I'm going to do that. That's more important to me. So yes, I do have some routines. I do typically like to sit in a certain seat on the bus when we're on the road. During the playoff run, I did listen to the same songs when we take the bus to the games. But like, if I ended up sitting next to someone and they struck up a conversation with me, I wasn't going to tell them, hey, I can't talk, I got to listen to this song, right? Like, as an example. And I will tell you guys, the morning of Game 5 of the World Series, I went and bought champagne for us to have in the booth when I got back up from the clubhouse, because I don't believe in jinxes anymore. I used to. And it's just one of those things where I know that jinxes don't really impact the outcome, nor do broadcasters. And so, kind of as a FU to that whole notion, I brought champagne. I didn't show it on the bus. I was very careful not to let the players see it because I didn't want to get in their minds. But we put it out there, and it just, the jinxes, the superstitions, that stuff's fun. There might be little things that I do. But other than saying a quick little prayer during the national anthem, there's not anything that I probably did 162 times out of 162.
Thank you so much for your time. Sorry, I had to mute myself. It's a little loud in here.
All good. Go Stars. Let's get a win tonight.
Cheers.
Let's keep the questions rolling. How about Ryan? You're up.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Hey, Jared. Yeah, my name's Ryan. I'm a freshman at the University of Maryland. I really wanted to ask about growing your chemistry on air with Eric. And when you're in the booth with a guy, a legend like that, a Frick Award winner, how do you kind of let him continue to run the show like he's done for so long, while still proving that, you're qualified too, you have a spot there and you've kind of earned that? How'd you kind of find that balance early on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Hopefully all of you get the chance to work alongside someone like Eric, with that resume. So Ryan, I'm really fortunate. I got to know Eric when I was 18 years old, and he has been, as I mentioned earlier, one of my foremost mentors. And so when I got the job, I wasn't starting from scratch with him. But that doesn't change the fact that that spring training, the first time I did a game with Eric, I was incredibly nervous. I mean, this is spring training, right? I think it was a webcast. It wasn't even on the radio. Maybe it was on the radio. I don't remember. I was super nervous because this is Eric Nadel. And for me, maybe what made it worse was like, this was arguably the person who made me want to do this job, right? I grew up listening to him. I didn't realize it when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, listening to him, but that developed this foundation of like, I listened to broadcasters. I'd fall asleep. I didn't have a TV in my room when I was 8 years old. So I'd fall asleep listening to Eric Nadel or Ralph Strangis, and the Mavericks had, different broadcasters at the time. And so this wasn't just some Ford C. Frick Award winner. Like, this is the guy who maybe means more to me than anyone else. And then the relationship. And yeah, it was intimidating. And Matt Hicks and I talk about it all the time. Eric is so good, and not because he tries to, but like sometimes we just feel less than because we're not Eric, right? We're in little things like people come into our booth, they want to see Eric. We have fans that will, throw balls up. You Eric, where's Eric? They don't care about us. And I think it's funny. I don't know. I think Matt sometimes maybe it rubs them the wrong way. But that to just his ability and the quality of what he does on air. And I think there's some degree of competitiveness where you don't want to bring that down for him, right? Because you're not competing against one another, you're on the same team. But I think the real answer to that question, Ryan, it depends on who that person is. I know broadcasters who have incredibly impressive resumes who I've heard are very tough to work with. They let their resume, and they puff their chest out, and they want it to be known that they're the guy. I'm really fortunate. Matt would say the same thing. All Eric wants to do is have fun on air. I mean, Eric's great. He's incredibly inclusive. After my first year in 15, it was Eric's idea to stop doing scoreboards in game and instead have me do them so that we could have, a third member of the conversation during the game in the booth. And I think he wanted to do that because, he wanted to try and change things up. I think it was him looking out for me. Hey, I want your voice on air during games, even when you're not doing play-by-play. And that role grew to the point now where when I'm not doing play-by-play, I'm still on air for a decent chunk of the game. So that's the kind of partner he is. And working with him, no matter what I want to put in my head, he's never made me feel like I've got to be nervous about working with him. And I know that that's not the case with broadcasters who have accomplished what he's accomplished all the time. So I think hopefully all of you guys are in the position to be the Eric Nadel to someone else's me. And I hope that, you're always welcoming and inclusive, and don't forget like how it's not an arrogance thing. I mean, Eric's never said this to me, but I'm sure Eric knows that maybe it was nerve-wracking for me early on, and he did a great job in that first year, just bringing me into the conversation early and bringing me into an easy spot to where I had a long runway to get my feet wet. And I think that's helped tremendously. And he's been very public about his support of me as well, which that's meant the world, especially in the early days when I was familiarizing myself with the fan base.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate the answer.
Oh, hey, let me add one thing too. I'm sorry I didn't say it. I think like the relationship part of it is, you're not going to be friends with everyone. And you might have friends that wouldn't make great partners, but I think the attempt and the desire to have a relationship with your partner helps you get to know them. Just like anything, that relationship, it makes the growing pains a lot easier. It makes those conversations more honest, but also more empathetic. And I think that, it's important to try and have that relation. You don't need to be best friends off air, but to give a crap about their life, get to know them. I think that stuff makes a big difference, even if it's not directly reflected on air, in a given broadcast.
Let's go next to Jalen.
Hi, Jared. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Jalen, and I'm a current PA for NBC4.
Awesome.
I was just wondering, you kept mentioning how, we're never a finished product. And I wanted to know, to me, that meant like, no one's perfect and there's always areas of improvement. So I was wondering how you go about approaching working on your areas of improvement when it comes to storytelling and working in play-by-play.
Yeah. So just generally speaking, one of the best lessons I learned, and I kind of made mention of this or referenced this early on. Everyone's different too. So Jalen, I'll tell you, this is the answer that works for me. It might be different for everyone else. I work best when I am focused on one thing, right? Like if I want to, there are 365 days in the year, and I might take a few days off out of those 365, but I've got several hundred days a year I'm working where I can get better at something. That's a lot of opportunities. I don't need to try and tackle 10 different things in a given day, right? So I'm going to take one thing and I'm going to work on that one thing. But I always use this example. I played a lot of basketball growing up. My brother, I have older brother. They're 11 and 13 years older than I am. So they went through a lot of the stuff that, I went through way ahead of me. They knew some of the pitfalls and the lessons. And, they were, when I was like 8, it was Sega Genesis, but they were like, hey, go outside and shoot. You're not going to get better playing Madden 93 on Sega Genesis, right? But if you go to the gym, you want to get better as a basketball player, you go to the gym for an hour and all you do is jack up half court shots and try and one mixtape type tricks. I mean, are you really getting better? Maybe tiny amounts. Or would you be better off maybe saying spending 40 minutes or 30 minutes and having an understanding of what you need to work on and working on that? So maybe I need to work on driving to my right and pulling up and hitting mid-range jump shots. Well, I'm going to start at the top of the key. I'll maybe put a chair on the elbow. I'm going to work on, a game move, a jab or something, take 2 hard dribbles to my right, rise up, work on my shot. That's how I'm going to get better at that element of my game. I'm not going to get better by going to the gym and just saying I was there for an hour and a half, but I was trying to, throw myself alley-oops off the backboard or something, right? So I think figuring out what it is that you need to work on and drilling yourself, creating an environment, whatever it might be, to work on that, whether it's in game or in a live show or outside of it. So maybe for me, let's say I want to work on my ability to set up pitches in a variety of ways. Well, I might have a game recorded, or I'll put up my computer and I'm going to every pitch. That's all I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the pitch. And I'm going to do it in different ways. I'm going to think of creative ways to do it. And I don't care what happens after that. I don't care about the pitch or anything like that. There are 200 pitches in a game. I'm going to, let's say 2 innings. I might have 60 opportunities to work on that. And that's my focus for that session or that situation. The last part of that, though, Jalen, is you got to be honest with yourself. One of the biggest drawbacks or one of the biggest setbacks for people is when they're not willing to look in the mirror and give themselves as honest of a assessment as they can. You're going to have people who are going to give you critiques, and you need to be open to their negative feedback, right? Don't be the parent who's like, it's never their son or daughter's fault, or the person, it's never my fault. I was 1 for 17 shooting, but man, every single pass I got sucked. Don't be that person. You got to be willing to look in the mirror and understand where you can get better. And yes, it's important to get feedback and critiques from other people. No one's going to be more invested in your career than yourself. No one on a daily basis is going to care more about your growth and your development than yourself. And if you have a level of knowledge and understanding of what you're supposed to do, even if you can't execute it, you can then critique yourself and help yourself understand how you need to get better on a daily basis. So specific to storytelling, the advice I was given on air for baseball was layering your stories, not trying to fit a large chunk of a story in between pitches. Break it down into layers, like you're peeling an onion. You give a little bit here, and if the ball is put in play, you're not at some awkward cliffhanger, right? You understand your stopping points, the layers of the onion, so that each pitch you just next layer, and if something happens in the game that diverts your attention, you can easily get back and pick up that story, the next opportunity. And that comes with sometimes planning before the game. If there's a story I know I want to talk about, that might be, more than just a 1 or 2 line story. I might take a second and think, all right, how do I want to present this? In what opportunity, what situation doesn't make sense? I think it's important not to force stories, right? The game is still the priority. You'll have an opportunity to tell it at some point and then figure out the best way you want to present it. Certain things, though, they come up organically during the game, and you just got to take your best crack at it. Think of how you did it. And if you want to do it differently the next time, you do it differently the next time.
Thank you.
I want to follow up on that, and we'll get to these other questions too. But as far as the numbers game, Jared, when it comes to play-by-play, and the great thing with play-by-play is the games, with everything that's changing in sports media, the games aren't going away. That's a constant. But when you look at Major League Baseball, there's 30 teams, right? So there's very limited numbers. When you look across our industry, there's plenty of people that you and I both know who they do some play-by-play on the side. It's a part-time gig. You have a full-time gig. For people starting out at the beginning, what would you kind of describe as far as the outlook, trying to pursue this and trying to get to somewhat of a position like you've gotten to?
Yeah, I hate saying this, but I mean, I have to acknowledge the luck part of it, right? You guys hear it and it sucks. I'm not going to go into it anymore because it doesn't help you necessarily. Just know it's out there, right? There are a lot of people who were probably just like me, who maybe they didn't get a break that I got, and that's why I'm where I'm at. And they, they are where they're at, right? Not because I'm necessarily better. I was in the right position. Jeff, I think I'm not a Boy Scout by any means, and I'm sure there are people out there who can't stand me, but I try my best to be a good person. And this is a very social industry. I mean, the reality is there are very few jobs in which you're not interacting with people, but this job especially, right? We're asking about, working with partners and stuff. If you have a reputation of being I don't know, sorry, like a D-bag, I apologize if I can't say that, that's going to travel with you. There's someone I worked with when I first moved here, but moved back to Dallas at 103.3, who is super talented, my age, way more talented than I was. He is not in broadcasting anymore because no one liked working with him. And it's sad because when I tell you he was more talented than I was, it wasn't even close. If you are the very best broadcaster out there, you are you'd be the number 1 overall draft pick. You maybe can get away a little more leeway. But especially when you're coming up, you don't have the skins on the wall. That stuff matters. People will hire a lesser talented person, not supremely, right? You gotta be talented. I don't want to say that you don't, but if you're a 9 on a 1 to 10 scale, but no one you have to try really hard to find someone to say they enjoy working with you, you're not going to get the job over the 7 who people love working with, right? That matters. And then the other part of it too is the reality is everyone's situation is different. I mean, this is where you become an adult, right? It's not participation trophy in high school or everyone gets a chance in college. There are people who are in financial situations where they cannot write it out as a small market broadcaster making $25,000 a year for 7 years. And there are other people who can. I went to USC. I was there on scholarship and financial aid. I did not have the financial background growing up or leaving college where my dad could support me as a broadcaster making $21,000 a year when I was in Midland, Michigan. I was on my own. He maybe could help here or there, but not much. And so I probably, if I was in the minor leagues for 8 years, I probably would have tapped out because it was not realistic for me to make, maybe I could have gotten it to 35, 40. I mean, I don't know, and want to get married and have a family. That's real life stuff. Whereas a really good college buddy of mine, his family, they got all the money in the world. And his dad and mom said, hey, as long as you're chasing your dream, we will support you. And that's awesome. There's nothing to apologize for about that. I hope I'm in a position to do that with my kids one day. But those are real life factors that come into play. So you got to understand your situation. You got to be fair, honest, and realistic with yourself about that. And you got to make decisions based on that. Now, the counter to that is it's really tough if you put a clock on yourself. You know, when I was in the minors, and this is something Eric Nadel told me early on, you can't sit there and say, well, in 2 years, I need to be here. In 1 year, I need to be there. 3 years later, I need to be here. It just, you're going to put yourself in a bad spot mentally if you go about it that way. Because sometimes it all happens at once. And it's a game of back and, just because you're ahead of someone right now or someone's ahead of you right now, doesn't mean you can't leapfrog them in 6 months, a year, whatever the case might be. But you do need to be fair to yourself and understand your situation, where you're at, what is important to you. The biggest decision I made was I left my full-time job in Michigan. I had a salary, benefits, all under one roof. I was doing afternoon drive sports talk, minor league baseball, Division I basketball, Division II football, all under one roof. I didn't have to, piece it all together. I decided to leave. I wanted to move to a bigger market. I did not want to get caught in the treadmill of minor league baseball. I took a chance. I took a part-time job, no benefits, none of that. Moved back to Dallas. I could only do it because this is where I'm from. I could live with my dad. I was still young enough to where I could be on his health insurance for about a year. And then I was going to be on my own with that. I was getting paid hourly. I had to pick up, I drove Uber. Like I did stuff to kind of make ends meet because it's what I wanted to do. But I believe that by moving back to Dallas, putting myself in a major market, I was betting on myself that I would work my ass off and hopefully a break would fall my way and I would be in the right position to get a job. And it worked out. I don't know how I'd feel about it if it didn't work out. It worked out for me. I don't know if I would have made that decision if I came from a different financial background or if different opportunities, different connections, all that stuff. All that stuff is real and it all plays a role in the decisions you make, the relationships you have, the people who are willing to look out for you, the people you trust. That stuff is super important. And all of that stuff has played a role in me getting from A to Z with where I started to, where I am now and where I want to ultimately go.
That's so funny because I can relate to the turning 26 and losing health insurance. I crossed that bridge too.
It's scary, man. Yeah.
It is. Aiden, let's go to you. I know you've been waiting. You're up.
Thank you, Jeff. Just I don't really have anything prepared, so it was like I just wanted to ask because I go to Wayne State College up in Wayne, Nebraska.
Uh-huh.
I'm a freshman there. I'm in sports media. So what we do at Wayne, we run everything. It's completely student driven, and as a freshman, it was really scary doing it at first because it's camera operations, directing, board, play color, sideline. I mainly run the sideline side, and I just wanted to ask our guest here is like, oh, I forgot what I was gonna say, but it's like, as somebody who's like fresh into this, because I swapped my major a week into school from music to sports media. Did you have like a fear factor when like you said you came down from Michigan back to Dallas just to pursue this dream of play-by-play? Did you have a fear factor in that at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was leaving. I didn't want to ramble too much, but I was leaving play-by-play and doing that. I was taking a job with ESPN Radio in Dallas doing just show hosting, and I kind of thought, well, maybe this is going to be my path. Maybe I'm just going to be a sports talk host, which there's nothing wrong with that. It just that was never my 1A. My 1A was always live game play-by-play. Yeah, I think you're going to be in a position. I would love to tell you that you guys are all going to be able to go from job to job with a job description that is exactly what you want every single time. That's not the reality. And sometimes, hopefully you're in a spot where you are able to make tough decisions, right? Because that means you have opportunities out there. But yeah, I mean, I was scared essless, all the time. Like, what if I don't make it? And here's the other thing too. I think sometimes we need to, as broadcasters, give ourselves some grace, especially when we're young and in the position y'all are in, because chances are when you guys graduate, most of your friends, I don't know. For me, most of my friends were like, they ended up becoming lawyers, doctors, the finance people, and they just kind of blend in. But you have the job that your friends find interesting. You have the job that like people want to talk about. You have the job that, random people who like you're you're not friends with, but your friends are friends with, like, oh, my buddy Aiden's doing this or that. And there's some, like, whether you realize it or I don't know. For me, I always felt pressure. Like I felt like, man, if I don't make it, like I'm letting these people down. And that's not fair. You can't do that to yourself. And I shouldn't have then. But like, I don't know, if you get fired from like a standard 9 to 5 job, like whatever, you'll find a new job. But like if I never grew and I was, I flamed out as a broadcaster, I felt like, gosh, everyone's gonna, man. Remember when you used to broadcast? Gosh, that was awesome. We thought you were gonna make it. And here's the thing: you're gonna have friends who they don't know any better, and they're gonna tell you, they're gonna gas you up. They're gonna be, oh, one day you're gonna be this, you're gonna be this big thing, right? And they kind of put you on this pedestal because they don't know any different. Like if you're a lawyer, you're in law school or whatever, then they all there's more of a familiarity with where you're going to end up or what type. There's not as much familiarity outside of your group of friends who do this. And so, yeah, I put pressure on myself. I thought I thought if I didn't have success, I was letting people down. But here's the other thing. What is success? Have I made, like someone said to me the other day, man, I'm so jealous you've made it. You're broadcasting Major League Baseball. Have I? Did I only make it because I had this job? Did I make it earlier because I was, loving what I was doing and married with, a chance to kind of be in my hometown? What is making it? That's, you guys define that. You guys tell your own story in that regard. Don't let other people, add that to the equation. But yeah, was there fear? Absolutely, there was fear. I'm a super competitive person, and I did not want to fail to reach my goals. But what I've also realized is every time I reach goals, I'm not satisfied. I just reset them. And so I guess the last thing I'll say on that is, if you are trying to find fulfillment solely from your job, I think you're going to be very disappointed. Do not disregard your actual, like your life outside of work. I put in so much. My wife will tell you, I mean, she shares me with my job, but I used to let my job define me. And I just don't anymore. I don't have the same desire to work 300 events a year. I just think that stuff's important, and that takes some of the pressure off as well. It doesn't have to change your ambition, doesn't have to change your motivations, but I think it does create a better balance in your head and allows you from a confidence or fear standpoint to go about every single day with a smile on your face.
Well, and just to add to that, the fulfillment part, I think when I look back on my career and the stops I've made, I didn't do a good enough job of finding fulfillment in those earlier steps. Like, enjoying the small market time and not just always being looking ahead to, hey, but I need to get here, I need to get here. I think that's important. And like we've heard from a lot of the other speakers we've had on this year, as far as like opportunity goes, it's acknowledging all the opportunity, not just kind of pigeonholing yourself into, well, I need to do this and I need to do it in these steps. I think is important. Let's get to some more questions. Nee, you're next. If you could turn on your camera, please.
Oh, sorry, Jeff. Unfortunately, I can't turn on my camera at this time.
No worries.
Jared, thank you for your time. I just had a quick question. Obviously, this season was exhilarating. I'm in Toronto and I saw the Rangers sweep the Jays towards the back end of the season. Congratulations on winning it all. But before that, Texas did go through some, I guess, dry patches, some rough seasons. As a broadcaster, how did you stay creative in terms of, how did you stay creative during those tough stretches?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think baseball is maybe tougher when your team stinks more than any other sport. A, the amount of games, but B, like in football, if you stink, then you can be excited about the draft and maybe you're focusing on Saturdays and the quarterback you might draft first overall, and then he's gonna come that next year and reignite the franchise. Well, in baseball, if you stink, you draft a guy and you might be excited, but you're not going to see him for 3 to 5 years. So the fan base doesn't have that same excitement that is attached to losing. Same with the NBA as in the NFL. You might be able to draft Victor Wembanyama or Chet Holmgren, and so you're at least excited about that very next year. When you're bad in baseball, when you lose 100 games, you don't know when you're going to snap out of it. For us, thankfully, we went from 100 losses to 90 to winning the World Series. I would say sometimes a single game in a vacuum during one of those seasons, it's not tough because you can just have fun with it. If we're losing 10-1, maybe we take our foot off the super serious pedal, and we'll have some entertaining conversations that help the listener get through the game. Because when you're 30 games out of first place and you're down 7 runs in the 3rd inning, chances are people's motivations in listening are going to be a little bit different than, say, that series in Toronto that the Rangers desperately needed late in the year. Now, where it's tough is when you stack those games on top of one another and you feel a sense of apathy towards your professional existence. I mean, the last 6 years prior to this season, it just felt like people forgot the Rangers existed to some degree, and that's tough. That's not fun. And then the other part of it is the people you're around, right? There's so much when you're a team broadcaster, you spend so much time with people, a part of the team, players, coaches, front office folks. And my job is not my job is not based on, like, the success of my job is not tied to the team's winning or losing, right? I can be a great broadcaster and the team can stink, or I can be an awful broadcaster and the team can win. But those people's jobs a lot of times are tied to that. And so I think one of the toughest things is the people you're around mostly are on edge a little bit more. They're not as peppy because they're worried. Shoot, we just lost our 7th game in our last 8. And am I going to have a job next year? And all that stuff, right? Or players, like, am I going to be sent down tomorrow because I just got shelled for the, 4th straight start? Everyone's looking over their shoulder. There's just a lot of that. Now, there are different challenges that come with, being really good, but I would say on the whole, it's just a lot more enjoyable experience, of course, when you're broadcasting a winning team than a losing team. And I think that as much as the broadcasting elements of baseball that allow for conversation, maybe give you an opportunity to sidestep some of the challenges, they still exist because it's still 162 games and 183 days for a team that, is out of it 2 weeks into the season.
Thank you.
Awesome. 3 more to get to. Let's go to Donna.
Hi, I'm a sports reporter in College Station,
Oh.
and I guess kind of a two-parter, but how do you deal with like imposter syndrome?
That's a great question. Do you feel that in College Station? Are you feeling that right now?
I honestly would say it kind of just depends on the week. Like some weeks I'm like, oh yeah, I'm crushing it. And then like other weeks, or like if you go to like a bigger maybe like we had high school state championship week this week up in up at AT&T. And when you're up there and you like see, what everybody else is doing too, that like I'm friends with a bunch of the other sports reporters as well, but like just like it feels like there's a little bit more room for like comparing yourself to other people.
Yeah.
So I guess like I notice it more so like during those times. So I would say it's more of like a roller coaster scenario.
So no, I get that. I saw something on Instagram like a month ago about being like an introverted extrovert or extroverted introvert, which that I felt like something was speaking to me, because there's some days where I'm super outgoing and I'm a chatterbox, and then there are days where like I walk into a room and I'm on the outside of the conversation because I don't know, yeah, it's just I'm not feeling it, right? And I think that I still experience that now, like the World Series. The Rangers, because they have not been good, we have not had a lot of national games. We have not been in the national spotlight. And so this playoff run, and especially the World Series, we're around a lot of, national people. And, I don't know, sometimes I think I'm just a radio broadcaster for the Rangers. They don't, why would they want to talk to me? And for no reason other than in my head, I convince myself of that. But at the end of the day, and then there's some days where it's some days where that's not the case at all. Some days where I jump right in, and some of that's because maybe I have a friend who puts his arm around me and brings me along. I'm going to introduce you to this person, and sometimes I'm that person for someone else. I would say I try to remind myself this is very much like first day of school. Everyone is so nervous, but at the same time, like everyone just wants to be friends with everyone because we're all nervous, right? and maybe not, maybe the parallel isn't that everyone's nervous, but no one's out there like sizing you up and judging you when you come up and speak to them. And every time you speak to someone, it's just an opportunity to meet someone awesome, right? And the extension of that, I would tell you, when I was first starting out as a broadcaster, every new broadcaster I'd meet, whether it was in the Northwoods Collegiate League, the Pioneer League, the Midwest League, I would listen to their stuff the night of the first game or maybe before, and it would all be about, am I better than them? Am I better than them? Well, that's a dangerous game to play. One of my very best friends is a guy named Mike Cousins who broadcasts for ESPN. He was the first, I don't want to say the first broadcaster who I came across who was better than I was, because there were several, but he was the first guy I came across early on who was an age peer of mine who was like unequivocally better than I was. Like it wasn't even like up for debate. And that got in my head, and I was like jealous. But Mike was the super nice guy. And I finally was like, you know what? I want to be the best broadcaster there is, but chances are I'm not going to be. And it's okay if I see someone do something on air or hear something on air, I'm like, that person's good. And it's only made me want to get to know them more and become friends with them and learn from them and enjoy that dynamic and relationship. And maybe I find that I don't like them, and that's okay too. But I think it's okay to not be the best in the room. As long as you continue to try and push yourself to get better every day, and also know that while it feels like everyone is watching you, I play basketball a lot, and I had a horrible game last night. I play in this pickup game, and we get really competitive, and I was terrible, and I sent one of my teammates a text. I was like, "Gosh, I'm sorry. I was a bag of you know what today," and he's like, "Honestly, I didn't even realize I was awful too, and I couldn't get out of my own head." And it's just a reminder that so many people, that it feels like everyone's looking at you. They're not. They might look at you, but then they're going to look at the next person, the next person, the next person. And the best way to combat that is just have some confidence, go up and be you. It doesn't matter what your resume is. If you're a good person, you make them laugh, good conversationalist, whatever it is you bring to the table, people are going to enjoy that. They're going to enjoy being around you. And I'm telling you this, I am not perfect at this. I need to get better at that, but I wish that I could hear myself. I could remind myself of those things every time I'm in one of those scenarios.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like I've heard that similar sentiment from quite a few people.
And hey, it's okay. Like, whether it's imposter syndrome, you have a bad whatever it might be, it is okay to have those. You're going to feel how you're going to feel, right? You can't control how you're going to feel. You can control how you respond to that. So it's okay if you have imposter syndrome, and it's okay if you go home one night and feel like, gosh, I should have gone up and introduced myself to this person or that person. Why didn't I do that? That's okay, because it's not the end of the world. You're going to have more opportunities. And if you like, there's a scenario where you might not, go out and create that opportunity. If you wanted to meet Joe Smith and you might not see Joe Smith for another year, then I bet if you were determined, you can try and find someone who knows Joe Smith and can put you in touch and figure out a way to be in front of that person.
Cool. Thanks.
You got it.
All right, guys. We have two more questions. Jared, are you okay hanging on just
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit while longer?
Yeah, I
Cool.
ramble. I'm sorry, guys.
No, you're good. This has actually been really great. I just messaged Jeff saying, like, I like what he's saying because everything he talks about reminds me of me and like what I think on a day-to-day basis. So it's comforting to know that there's other people out there who are battling imposter syndrome and doing all these things.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go to Molly. Hey, girl, what's up?
Hi guys. Hi Jared. Thanks for coming on. This is gonna sound crazy. I'm actually a senior in high school. And I'm currently in the process of figuring out where I'm gonna spend my next 4 years. And I'd say my biggest question is right now is what are your biggest tips to stand out from the crowd? Because I've guessed, like, especially right now, since I'm so young, I really want to learn about how I can stand out in front of a crowd so well. So I guess, what are your tips to look better in front of a crowd than also just stand out to people in charge or other, like, people who have the higher ups?
Yeah. And I don't mean this to be a smartass. You mean, like, you don't mean specifically like how do you present yourself in front of a crowd? You're talking about how to separate yourself from the pack, right?
Yes.
Okay. So one area where I know I'm going to answer this in random order. I did not come up. I came up in the era where you still would put your work on a CD, and that's how that like your reel was on a CD. I think I maybe caught the tail end of a flash drive. I know how to use flash drives, but point being, the technology these days and the opportunities, the platforms that you have at your disposal are so much more varied now than they were even when I was like really in the thick of the job search process. But so I don't know that I'm the most equipped to talk about all the different channels you can pursue. I would just tell you that there are a lot out there, and don't ignore any of them. That doesn't mean you have to, do all of them, but like I remember when Twitter first came about, I was like, I don't need to do this Twitter stuff. And I don't really like Twitter. Like if I didn't have this job, I probably would have an account and never tweet. But like I recognize how important of a medium that is. TikTok. When TikTok came out, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just people. I can't dance. What do I have to do with TikTok? There are people who, I mean, you guys know there are people who make a living off of their TikTok videos, right? So how don't ignore any of these opportunities. How can I, do I want to start a podcast? I mean, a lot of people want to start podcasts, but do I want to do that? Do I want to have a YouTube channel? Am I going to create a niche on TikTok? Is that even your thing? If it's not, that's okay. I think it is a cliche answer, and maybe this takes expanding on another time, but the best version of yourself is going to be you. So you're not going to stand out if you're trying to be someone or something else, because you're not going to be good at that. Or you're not going to be good at, good at it enough to make that work for you. But here's the thing I'd say from a job standpoint. If you think of a job like a race, you got the starting line and then obviously the finish line. And the finish line, the person who finishes first is the person who gets the job. The race starts when the job gets posted, or whatever. I mean, however, yeah, I guess that's how people find out about jobs, right? Or maybe it's a very public job and someone leaves, and so you know that the job's going to be posted. If you are at the starting line when the race starts, then you are making it way more difficult on yourself. You need to be in a position, you need to put yourself in a position to get a head start. How do you do that? I hate to use the word networking, but that's just the one that's most commonly understood. I like to think of it as just developing relationships. No job that I've not gotten a job where I did not have an existing relationship. So as an example, let's go winter meetings 2010. I'm looking for my first job out of college. And I knew that I'm graduating in May, and with the baseball season, I'm not going to be done till the end of May. So I'm not really going to be in the mix for any full season minor league baseball jobs because they start in April. But at the time, they don't have it anymore. They had something called short season. It started in mid-June. Perfect fit. I reached out before the winter meeting started, about a month before. I reached out to every single short season minor league team. There were probably about 30 of them. And I got responses from a few, 3, 4 maybe. But for all 3 or 4 of those, none of which had posted a job yet that they told me over email that would be open, I was getting a head start over everyone else who was in Orlando, Florida at the winter meetings, who made first contact with the people hiring these jobs when the job got posted, right? I already had a head start. You can take the chance and be one of 100 and try win a race alongside 99 other people at the same point. But if I'm running a mile and 99 other people are running a mile, I'd much rather start 1 lap in when everyone else is starting, with 4 laps to go. And so you do that by developing relationships. You do that by networking. You do that by having people who care about you and who are interested in your well-being professionally. And you do it by going out and seeing what's out there before the jobs get posted.
Thanks, Molly. Okay, we're gonna go to our last question here with Jack. What's up, Jack?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Jared, thank you for taking the time to meet with us tonight. I just have a quick question. I'm a senior at the College of Charleston, and I am interested in getting into sports broadcasting and journalism after school. I was just curious, how do you prepare before a live broadcast, and what are some of the main things you focus on when preparing for a big game?
I think the game is the story still, right? You're not the story. So I want to know what's important, what are the big storylines going in. I want to know. I I think of it like an athlete. I try and envision how the game might play out. I try and be prepared for certain situations, and they're not always going to play out that way, right? If I was broadcasting the Cowboys Bills game yesterday, I don't know that I would have guessed that the Bills would have won the game despite Josh Allen throwing for 95 yards, right? I don't know that I would have guessed that James Cook would have, but like I try to think of the 4, 5, 10 ways the game might play out and how that might impact how I want to prepare. I think it's also important to know that there's not one right way to prepare. The right way to prepare is your, the way that makes you feel most comfortable. And there's also not a set of pieces of information you have to have. Let me backtrack. There are certain things going into any broadcast that if you don't know, then that reflects poorly on you. But beyond that, there's an ocean of information out there, and you can pursue any of it, right? And I always tell people, pursue what's interesting to you, because if you're not interested in what you're researching and what you're prepping, then when you bring it out on air, you're not going to sound as interested when you're talking about it. So there are a million different things I could do to prepare for a given baseball game, but I'm following what's going on. I'm engaged on a daily basis, so that's going to direct me certain ways. I might see something from the game before, and that might push me down a certain path. And if I don't go down that path, no one's going to be like, gosh, Jared's so ill prepared, but maybe something interesting comes from that. And I would say being curious is going to be your best asset for anything when it comes to preparation. Be curious, ask questions. Questions lead to more questions. They lead to stories. Stats are great. I love stats, but behind every stat, there can be a story. It doesn't have to be. All right. But let's say a player is, all right, let's just Cowboys Bills last night. James Cook, I can just go out and say James Cook had 100 and whatever yards and leave that stat in and of itself. But if I had the opportunity to talk to James Cook, James, you had your best game of the year. What did you do? And maybe he'll give you a crappy answer and say, I did nothing different. My offensive line was great. Maybe he'll tell you that he was, got a message from Curtis Martin earlier in the week. And, he's like, hey, I want you to look at what you're doing here. Go watch film. I watch film. I made this adjustment. My first step, this or whatever. And now you got a great story to tell. If you only leave things at stats, it can be interesting, but not as interesting as if you ask questions about it. We had a player a couple years ago who his fly ball rate, it was up about 10%. And I could have just said, hey, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa's fly ball rate is up 10%. Cool. I mean, I don't think it's that interesting to the average person, but you ask him about it. He spent the off season chopping down trees in Hawaii because the motion of an axe chopping down trees is similar to the motion he wanted to replicate with his swing to get more launch on the ball. Now, all of a sudden, I got a pretty cool story about a guy who's telling me that chopping down trees in Hawaii has helped him become a better baseball player, right? So I just think being curious is always really important. And the more engaged you are, the better, the more curious you're going to be able to be. And the last thing I'd say is preparation is not done in a vacuum, especially if you're a team broadcaster, or even if you're not. It is a continuous thing, and something you might prepare for a game on a Monday might not end up coming into play for another month, but it's just a constant cycle. You don't prepare for a game in a vacuum on a day-to-day basis. It's all kind of cumulative, and you end up using a lot of it at some point, even if it's not the day you intend to use it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. I appreciate it.
Well, Jared, I have just one more question for you, but before I get to that, I just want to, on behalf of Jeff and I, and thank you to everyone who's on this call and everyone who couldn't make it for being a part of our first year of the sports committee with SPJ. We plan to keep this rolling into 2024, so be on the lookout for events, and thank you for your participation. And if you guys know people who would be interested in joining, Jared, yourself as well, we're always looking for people in the industry, students, anyone who wants to join and be a part of these webinars or be part of even the committee. We're always looking for members. So spread the word, and thank you, everyone. And Jared, my last question for you is, are you going to get a World Series ring? And if you are, will you come back and do a Zoom with us and show us the ring?
I am gonna get a ring. We had the fitting the other day. That was kind of exciting. I probably will almost never wear the ring. I might wear it on opening day, or I might bring it on opening day or for any sort of charitable sort of situation. But yes, I would be more than happy to show the ring. As someone who was born a Texas Rangers fan, I'm pretty fired up. I'm not a big jewelry person, but that's going to be a pretty special item that I'll cherish big time.
Wedding ring, World Series ring, right?
Yeah, exactly. I can't tell you which ring I will put ahead of the other, but I think the World Series ring is maybe going to be a little bit more expensive than the wedding ring, but the wedding ring is going to be way more meaningful to me.
For sure. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate it. Jeff, any last parting words?
Yeah, USC Club Baseball Rudy's come a long way with the World Series.
No, yeah, it's Jeff. This was like the varsity team Rudy. I ended up just became a manager for the team.
Oh, okay. Oh, for the varsity.
But they could
better.
redshirt as many people as they wanted. I technically never lettered. I was not good enough to play at that level. The club team, if I didn't hit 400 on the club team, then I would have been bummed. You'd be able to strike me. Jeff's an amateur baseball player these days after his college career. You guys know that, but I think Jeff could probably mow me down, but I take my chances back in my prime.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's been a lot of fun. Again, like Lauren said,
thank you for having me.
Thank you guys so much, and stay tuned. Happy New Year, and we'll see you guys in January. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Jared.